how is everybody?
Good.
That face said it all, Tamara. You need like
Sorry.
do we need a meditation session rather than a
Yeah.
brainstorming session?
No,
We're
this
doing,
is good.
performance reviews, so it's quite stressful at the moment. They were due at the end of Feb, but that obviously didn't happen. Then it was due at the end of last week, and that didn't happen. But we're getting there, like slowly. So yeah, it's always really hard around this time. The process is just a little bit tricky. Like we've got to go to head office for pre-approval, and manager's got to double check, and yeah, so there's a lot of extra steps involved. It's never straightforward, but hopefully we're close to the end of it and we can focus on the new year and new objectives and yeah, move forward.
Definitely. And is that so with the performance reviews, is it that they all kind of almost get submitted then up to HQ and then back down?
Yeah, because it has to go to HQ for review, because the performance reviews does impact bonuses. So whilst I don't want it to be so heavily focused on bonuses, and try and explain to the managers, it's an opportunity for you to sit down and check in with your employee, see how they performed and look at the new year. Their performance does impact their bonus. That there's a large component of that does impact the process, I suppose, because you have to go to head office and you have to let them know what the recommended bonus is, make sure that we're within budget, what was planned and pre-approved and all of that. So yeah, so sometimes I think we get caught up in that and then we forget why you have a performance review, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, that does. How about you guys, Tamara? What's happening at your end?
Oh, we're really busy getting into planning mode. So we go by the financial year. So yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about all of that, Jessica, because we just last week, my CFO and myself were debating when we do our calibration, like pay review and also the performance review, and we were just like debating, should we do them together? Should we do them separately? Because like you're saying, we don't want performance reviews to be about pay, but they kind of are directly correlated at the same time. So we were just trying to set a good cadence for that. And
because you do want some control and you do want to oversee it so that managers aren't promising anything, but also that they're setting realistic goals. And for people that didn't do well and are not getting their full bonus, why is that? And it's not that we don't trust our managers, but you just, I think if you just was like, just do it, it would just be out of control. So but by having more people involved, there's more steps involved and the process is just long and painful.
Yeah, so we're about to start budgeting now, and we'll get to sort of calibrating in May. Again, we were like, do we bring everybody into that, like all the managers, or just have some of the senior leadership team in there? And I think that's what we're going to do this year, just because there's too many chefs in the kitchen otherwise. And like you're saying, it just takes long. And we're a much smaller business than you guys, I think.
I like that saying, there's too many chefs in the kitchen. I like that. I'm going to take that on myself. I think that's true. I think that's a really good saying. Like there's just too many people involved, and whilst you want to have control and oversee it, by including more and more people in the process and the steps, it just makes it more complicated, I think. But then you've got to really make sure that communication is being delivered correctly as well.
Yes. So we're adamant that we need to do calibration for that reason, to make it consistent across the board, because everyone's got their own biases in their own team. They think their people are the best, so they're like, we'll give them all a pay rise. But anyway, so that's one thing we're working on. We're also working on workforce planning. We're kicking that off this week as well. So it's all kind of happening at the same time, which is how we roll. It's just how we roll. There's a bit of recruitment going on, as Tara knows, and what else? They're probably the two. WHS actually is another big thing that we're kicking off this week as well in terms of planning. So just putting a bit more science around what we're doing internally. Again, because we're a small business, it hasn't been something that's really been, I mean, don't get me wrong, they meet all their requirements and comply with everything, but it just hasn't been the biggest focus. So I've come in and I've been pushing to make it a thing in the organisation, that we actually have like a WHS plan and the rest of it, especially now with the psychosocial legislation and whatnot. So yeah, I've got a bit on my plate this week.
Just a
Very
bit
busy.
tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. But,
Especially when everything comes together at the same time from the sounds of it, which start of the year can always, I know it's you're running financial year, but this time of the
Ye-
year can always really feel like that, can't it?
it's chaotic. Yeah. It was the same
Mm.
last year as well. I don't know why. I don't know what it is this time of year, but yeah, busy.
Yeah, all happening.
Everybody's in full planning mode. Now, obviously we talked last time about getting an AI guest speaker. So I've identified somebody, but they're literally on holiday at the moment. So they'll be there for the next session that we run. So we'll maybe park the AI side of things unless anyone was going to bring anything specific up. But was there anything in this session that you guys wanted to ask any advice on or talk about?
No, nothing comes to mind at the moment. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I am curious to know, and it's only you, Jess, today, but I was keen to get feedback from everyone on what they are doing in terms of WHS, in terms of the psychosocial safety and positive duty to make sure you're complying. And again, I think you're a larger organisation, so it's probably different. But it's definitely a new thing in our organisation. So I'm pulling out the psychosocial legislation. I'm ticking all the, going, what are we doing? What are we not doing? And yeah, I'm just keen to hear what's being done elsewhere.
For us, like last year, I introduced like a mental health and, wellbeing policy, just about employees' responsibilities, about taking care of their own health and what managers need to do. And then I think it was the month of October, I did a lot of promoting about mental health and wellbeing tips and suggestions on how to keep a positive mind, promoting our employee assistant program. There was a lot of free training as well offered by the government. So I shared that with the managers as well so that they could understand their responsibilities and understanding like now with psychosocial hazards and things like that, what they need to do, what they need to look out for. But yeah, we haven't spoken much about in the last few weeks. And I think at the moment there's a bit of direction from head office about stuff like being burnt out and things like that. And I think because we're really busy at the moment, it's like, what can we do to take a step back and reflect and have a look at, the situation? I think what you probably see is a lot of the time is that when you are busy and you see staff burn out, it is because that sometimes there's people that are, I think, no longer doing what their JD says, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of talk about
totally.
that there's a lot of overlap, and then people are not really sure what their responsibilities are. And there's people that are doing more things than they should, I suppose. So that's something I probably want to explore.
Yeah.
But even for myself, like it's sort of a new area that I'm not too familiar with. And so I'm trying to look at what training, what kind of, if there's free webinars and things like that, that will help. The New South Wales government did for that mental health month one-on-one coaching. So that was really good. So every week I had a session with a psychologist who was really strong in psychosocial hazards and things like that. So she was the one that encouraged about updating the policy, promoting like free training. If there was no money from the business to put into training for the managers, what free sessions that they could do, things like that.
Yeah. So I've actually, through our EAP service, we have like X amount of hours that we haven't used. And so I've asked, they do training and all sorts of things as well. And so I've asked them to actually run a psychosocial safety training session with the leaders to make use of some of those hours before they expire.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's good training, because you just don't know what you're going to get sometimes, and impactful. But other than that, we're looking at mental health. And anyway, that's what this WHS plan is mostly going to be about. We've got all the other stock standard physical WHS stuff in place, but this is just a grey area. And I think we struggle with the workload piece as well, because we have sales reps that are in surgery till all hours of the night, then they have to get up and go to a conference the next day, and like it's really tricky to navigate that.
Yeah, and I think
and-
like it's all well and good to bring out a policy, but then you've got to train your managers.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized is that, okay, yeah, you can bring out a policy, but if the managers don't understand what their responsibilities are, they don't understand what to look out for, how to support employees. And like performance reviews, like I keep saying to managers, this is like a really good time to sit down and really check in and ask, how are you doing? Do you have enough resources? Do you have the tools to do your job? And that's why I was touching on before, is that I think at the moment, because it's so busy, I think work is overlapping and there's some confusion about what you're responsible for. And I think that contributes to a lot of the burnout, like the extra stress and everything. And like when it comes to the reps as well, are the managers like allocating enough case coverage, like sharing it amongst the team? I got feedback that some managers were struggling with cases or hospitals out being rural. So you have your rep that's going out there doing a 4-hour drive. Yeah, but they're always relying on that same rep to do it, and they're not sharing it. So yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
can be-
we're quite under resourced where we have one person per territory per
Yeah.
portfolio. So it's all on one person to do
Yeah.
all that travel, which we really struggle with. So we've got like a time in lieu policy as well, but people struggle to actually take that time in lieu because of the amount of stretch they have. And so, yeah, I'm reviewing all of that stuff as part of this, but
there's a
it does
lot,
make it
right?
hard.
You
Yeah.
look into one area and then you realize there's a lot more to it.
There's
Yeah.
so many, yeah,
Yeah.
so many things. And because I'm not out on the road, I'm not feeling what they're feeling. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to try and put yourself in their shoes, right?
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Is
think
that-
you
is
just got to
there
sometimes take it back and think, okay, like when we talk about psychosocial hazards, you've got your categories, but I think there's just so many things that can contribute, right?
There's so many layers, yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
layers, exactly. Yeah. And so it's
And
like,
it can be
okay,
quite subjective.
yeah, yeah.
So, and I was chatting with my chairman and he was like, everyone's going to say, oh, I'm stressed. And, where do you put the boundaries and where's the onus on the individual to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and
Yeah.
not contributing to that hazard?
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's like the concern that when you talk of like when you say mental health day, a lot of the managers get freaked out by that because they're like, oh, but we're understaffed or we're really busy. And they're really worried about opening those conversations because then it's like, well, what do I do if my employee's like, oh, I need to take a mental health day? But so it's like it comes back to that training. You got to train your managers on how to have those conversations. Like I've said, like everyone's entitled to time off if they're not feeling well, and that includes mental health. But then it's really asking, why are you feeling like this? Is it something at work? So again, there's just so many layers to it. And it's like, once I started to dive into it last year, I was like, oh, is this something I really want to look into? Is this something I really want to open? It's like opening up Pandora's box. I was like, oh, but
it really is,
you've got that responsibility. And so it's just trying to understand and get that training and knowledge to like navigate it, I suppose.
Yeah. We've also had, and I was chatting to Tara, I think I texted you maybe,
Yes.
but we've also had a number of cases, strangely, in the last year where we've had some neurodivergent, like self-diagnosed people that have been like, oh, I'm so stressed at work and my neurodivergence, like my diagnosis is contributing to this as well. And we're like, oh, wow, like this is so complicated because you can't discriminate, but at the same time, you need people to perform in their roles. And so where do you draw the line between underperformance and a neurodivergence, I suppose? I don't consider it to be a disability. It's just a different way of working.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with the people we've had, it has implicated, like their work they've underperformed as a result of these things. And it's been directly related to. And so it's just been a really sensitive area to traverse. Do you guys have anything in place to sort of mitigate that or deal with?
Not really.
No.
No. To be quite
Not
honest.
something you've come across, Jess?
No, like it's, yeah, it is quite sensitive. We did have one scenario where someone wasn't performing well, and I guess like when they first joined the company, the vibe that we got, like they were really positive and they were just ambitious and all of that. But then after 6 months, it kind of dropped off, and so you have the manager ringing you and you're like, okay, like something's not right. If you're noticing a change in behavior, like you just got to sit down and talk to them. But then managers also concerned, like I've got targets to meet, I've got to explain to the business why we've got no sales, for example. So like they're feeling the pressure, but I said, but at the same time, got to have had that conversation with the employee to figure out, is there something happening at home? Is it work? Maybe they came on board and it's not what they expected. And then, it did turn out that they were struggling with things at home. So I guess then what we looked at was giving them some time off to work out what was going on at home and fix that. But when they came back, I said to the manager, I think you just got to be really stern and lay out the expectations. But, at the same time, give them some kind of flexibility. So if they need to go home early, we can accommodate for that. But still, they need to meet expectations. They still have to do their job, what they're hired to do. And I think the end result was that it just didn't work out. And so, yeah, we terminated them. But it just comes back to, as long as you know that you're doing what you can to support that person, giving them time off. But at the end of the day, there's still, there's still got work to do. Yeah, exactly. So it is a bit tricky. But I've only had one scenario like that. That was that only scenario. But it was quite nerve-wracking because it's kind of like we, can understand this person struggling, but we hire them for a reason. We're paying them a lot of money and they're not delivering.
Actually, correct. Luckily for us, one of the people in one of these situations actually resigned in the end, because I think they just saw the writing was on the wall and they just weren't meeting expectations by any means, despite that person saying, oh, it's because of this issue that my personal issue that I can't show up and do my job properly. But that would have been a really tricky conversation to have otherwise. But similarly, we were just trying to keep the performance issue separate to the personal situation, but there was a massive overlap there. So we just had to be really explicit about that. But then I've got another situation where similarly this person has gone, oh, I'm suffering with anxiety and this and that. And their mental health is clearly an issue. And I'm still trying to work out how much of it is work, how much of it is home life. But it's very clear to the manager and myself that it is a personal thing, not necessarily work. But she hasn't sort of given us a diagnosis of anything, but she'll just kind of like not be online a lot. And the hard thing is when we look at, like my boss said to me, like, how do you pick this up in recruitment? Because we should be screening for this, right? But this person's psychometric test was perfect. Like it was so good. Like you wouldn't have faulted her the way she presented in interviews or anything like that. But now a year later, the cracks are showing and it's what is going on? Like we wouldn't have been able to pick this in the beginning.
No.
I mean, there's nothing you can test for to go, are you like mentally stable? Without discriminating. Anyway, it's just another curly one that I'm dealing with.
And I think that's hard, like, so there's been so many times when you interview someone and you think, wow, like they're great, they tick all the boxes, and then usually after 3 months, you start to see those cracks and you think, oh, but that wasn't like shown during the interview and things like that. And I think it doesn't matter what you ask or what tests you do, you can just never know
the real person.
But I've always said to the managers, like that first 6 months during probation is so important, that even if you think after a few weeks they're acing it or whatever, you still need to follow up. You still need to check in. Because they can like all look well, but sometimes later down the track things start to show, and then you
100%. And I find with more senior roles and people, sometimes those cracks don't start to show until further on. They're really good at masking it and just doing their job. In fact, I had another recruiter, Tara, for a finance role, not for these, but he wanted to do a 3-month guarantee, and I was like, that's not going to work for us because we do like a 3-month mid-probation review and then 6 months. And you can't expect someone to know what they're doing after 3 months. They're just
Yeah.
learning. And we've got to month 5 and then be like, okay, that person is not going to work out after 5 months of trying to get them up to speed. Anyway, this recruiter's really pushing. He's like, I'll do 4 months. I'm like, nope, it needs to be 6.
No, yeah, it has to
It's-
be fixed, right?
Yeah.
It's a funny one that though, right? Because I know that was definitely something I really considered when we first set out.
Yeah.
Because obviously once somebody's in, like obviously I think the only other ways that you get more information on somebody before they've started is obviously really good and multiple reference checking, and not just standard templates of reference checking,
Yes.
but being able to ask the questions that allow someone to answer in a way that's still legally appropriate, but that will draw certain things out. But like
Yeah.
you say, it's not until someone gets into the pressure in your environment and as much of that is pre-screened for. But I guess the other challenging thing from the recruitment agency side is having no control over the way that person's onboarded. So I
Yeah.
think the way we've
Right.
certainly worked together is that we have really close one-to-one meetings with that candidate and with the hiring manager and with you guys in HR along that whole process and beyond, to make sure that everybody's meeting everybody's expectations, right? Because like you say, a lot of it comes down to, are they getting that time for those one-to-ones, asking the leadership questions, how is somebody coping, what's happening outside of that. So often it can just get so busy, it's down to communication, which
Yeah.
affects that onboarding experience. But I get it. This is why I will sign that with my clients, because I know we have good relationships where we're doing that in partnership.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's really good that you do check in, because I mean, sometimes when I check in with the employees, they're like, oh, yeah, everything's great. But because you've built a relationship with that candidate and you've taken them through the interview, I think maybe they have more of a trust in that relationship with you, that they will be more open to say, actually, this wasn't explained to me in the interview. I didn't know I'd be doing this, or there might be something in the onboarding experience or something that they'll be more open to say to you, that then we can get that feedback and say, oh, okay, this is what we need to do to improve.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's either a very transparent one because we've explained that and they're happy for us to bring it, or we're often encouraging them to have a certain conversation that they maybe didn't know how to frame with
Yeah.
their manager or with HR. But
Yeah.
it's a combined effort, right? Like I see it. It's that whole, you don't know how somebody's going to show up until they show up. It's really interesting. I'll do a podcast on it, but we're doing this new assessment tool that I'm getting qualified in, because I've actually used it myself and used it for some positions that I recruited for. And I know there's so many different assessment tools out there and you can't rely on just an assessment tool. But I think what's really cool about this one is it really shows up what someone is driven by. And when then we take the brief, I think, Jess, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
We take the brief and create the profile around that brief. So then when you're measuring someone, it's not just in what they're saying, which we still do all of that kind of assessment, is are they actually going to be driven to do what's required for this position over a period of time? And I was talking to someone the other day and they were saying this person is just loves it. Like when they're on X page of whatever it is they need to do, they've still got the same energy to do that every day consistently, whereas this person doesn't. And I think just adding that layer in is something we're going to do to be sure that we've ticked every single box that we possibly can.
What
Yeah.
assessment is that? Can you share?
I'll get the name for you of it. It's actually one from the US, and I'm going to do my training and everything
Oh, cool.
with them.
Yeah,
But they
cool.
did the test. The background of it, there's definitely a disc element to it, but it's
yeah.
by no means the majority of the test.
Yeah.
I will get the other information to you
It's
though, and I'm
okay,
actually
yeah,
going to
yeah.
record him on a
Yeah.
podcast.
I'm reviewing our checks as well.
What ones do you guys use, if any?
Standard through a psychologist, Peoplelogica. I don't know if you've heard of them, but we do the standard psychometric tests through them, which is good to show people's aptitude and behaviours. And we do find it is quite true to form when behaviours play out. We can see they correlate. And then for sales people, we also do what's called an OMG assessment. So it's the Objective Management Group. I think they are American based as well, but that's all about their sales ability and their natural tendencies. So similar in that it has like a component that's all about their inherent skills, which if they're really bad, we basically don't move forward with them in the process because they're hard to train. but then there's like the
Right.
sales tactics and other things in there as well. So it gives us really good insights around them as a salesperson.
Yes, yeah, which is so important. Like you need to know it
Yeah.
is the type of the type of territory and the
Yes.
type of product and the sales skills that are going to be needed for that are
Yeah.
different, aren't they? And it
Yes.
would depend. It's good to have something to
And
have a look at that.
how they present in an interview is not necessarily how they will play out or how they're internally driven. So we're finding that quite good, but it is expensive. I'm just seeing what
Mm.
else is out there at the moment. Yes.
I can show you my profile. I mean, I definitely was in sales. You can have a look at mine and see if it's useful, if it would be a useful one for you
Yeah,
guys.
sure.
But no
Yeah.
judgment of me tomorrow in that.
We don't do it anymore, so it's okay.
But going back to that burnout piece that you guys are talking about, this is just such a common conversation. I don't know if you saw, I did a podcast with a lady called Peter Sitchef, and it was all around sales advice, actually. So it was all around sales advice to sales reps and managers and like methods to improve your relationships with customers, how to take people through a journey of change and conversion. But a lot of what she does is she's actually got a sales course, which is brilliant. I've looked at the content and gone through some of it myself. But her whole aim is around preventing burnout. And there's a whole module on teaching a salesperson or somebody in field to learn where to put what are their boundaries and learn how to communicate them, put them in place within the remit of absolutely still being able to do your job. Because I was in repping and speak to reps all day, every day. Again, if you looked at my drivers, I had the hunger in my belly to be in theatres till 10 o'clock at night. And I wanted to get up and go to that conference the next day. And that's why I did it for so long, because if you look at my drivers, there's a reason for that. I think it's when people are maybe going against drivers or values, or exactly what both of you said, actually going beyond what's actually expected,
Yes.
or not being able to identify their own boundaries and put them in place. That's quite
Clarity.
interesting training.
Piece.
Mm.
Yeah, keen to know more about that too. We're
I'll let
also
you know
reviewing
about
our
that.
sales training. We're reviewing
Yeah, it's
everything at the
really
moment.
good.
Yeah.
Well, what's quite cool about her is she came from industry. So she
Yeah,
was
and experience.
totally, so she gets it. And she's written a really good book that I read. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, like that. There's so many moments in that
Talking
you
about-
can resonate with, called My Beautiful Mess. And it's about being
Aw.
a rep and what her experience of that was.
Yeah.
But she was actually in Spine in Striker in Victoria, which was a very small focus for that company. And yet she was the top rep globally
Oh, wow.
for a sustained period over a number of years. But that came
Amazing.
with other
Mm.
things. So I think she's learnt a lot about
Yeah.
setting boundaries.
My
and
beautiful mess.
My Beautiful Mess. I'll send it through to you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
send
yeah.
the link to the podcast. That'd be really good.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to the podcast, and I can even get some copies of the book if it would be interesting, especially because you guys, if you haven't worked in field, it's sometimes hard to completely understand. This book tells
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
what
Yeah, that
it's
would be
like.
great.
Yeah, I'll
That would
get
be
you some
great.
copies.
My boss will pay for it, I'm sure. He'd love for me to read it. Yeah, wow. That would be
Mm.
cool. I'm just Googling.
Yeah. Peter Sitchef. I'll send you the link so you can see her on LinkedIn and everything too. Any other topic? Well, what we can do, those couple of questions you talked about again tomorrow around coming up with solutions around
Yeah.
neurodivergence.
Yes.
And what you were talking about too, Jess, we can drop that in the WhatsApp group too. And then maybe when we share this video, people might have some extra comments they want to help
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
That'd be good to see. Yeah.
Anything else that would be useful?
You send an assistant to me. Another.
Should we hire someone between all of us that can do all the really difficult things we need to do?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Well, that's what the AI thing will help with. Hopefully that is an assistant for you,
Yeah.
right? We just need to work that one out.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. No, I think that's it otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we get more people next time. But thank you both for coming. There's been lots of valuable discussion. I'll share this with everybody. And then the next session, don't forget, use the WhatsApp group for any questions in the meantime. And then the next session, we'll have our AI speaker there too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Lovely
Tara.
to see you both. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.